The majority of
right.
people don't want to see somebody fired or kicked out of their apartment because of an appearance, because
That's
of
right.
something as harmless as how I look.
That's right, and it's interesting that I think if you talk to people, you'll find that, and this is probably not very scientific, but I believe that this is true. You'll find that even though people, and it's one of the things that is sort of wonderful about who we are, that people, even if they sort of have issues with us or who we are or any other group, they still believe in fundamental fairness for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think, it's a matter of people being able to sometimes get over their sort of gut feelings, which are probably something
Sure.
that's been sort of ingrained in them. But people, I think fundamentally, people in this country have a very, very definite sense of fairness, and it's really is.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting when you look at what they're saying when people do want to butt in, and usually these people have very strong opinions that my neighbor should not be able to tell me how to live, my neighbor should not be able to tell me what to do, but then they're asking that they should be able to tell their neighbor how to live, and they should be able to tell their neighbor what to do, and when you start to illuminate that, it just becomes it becomes very obvious to people that that isn't a tenable position in an argument.
Right. Yeah.
There's the long-standing notion in the U.S. of live and let live.
Yes.
That comes into play.
Yeah.
So we're out here, we're talking to people because we want to illuminate the injustices that can be done so that the majority of people in the country can understand why it's so important that some of these legislative actions take place to ensure fairness, to ensure that the majority opinion does in fact rule.
Yeah.
The majority opinion being that all citizens in the United States should be treated fairly under U.S. law, should be treated equally under U.S. law.
Yeah, and certainly, this is. I don't want this to come across as being self-serving, because certainly, people like us, people in the transsexual community, have been discriminated against. There's no doubt about that. We have suffered some very bad discrimination, and certainly some really horrific things. I can't say that personally I've experienced anything terribly horrific. I think I've been fairly lucky. I have suffered discrimination. I can assure you of that. But it's not just us. There is still a lot of discrimination out there.
Mm-hmm.
We see it, and it's interesting because I think that one of the very positive things about being trans for me has been that it's opened my eyes to some things that, I sort of knew that discrimination was there. It hasn't gone away in this country. We've made great strides. There's no doubt about it. And we continually, we continue to move forward, which is a great thing. But there is still a lot of discrimination out there, and it's not just against us. And being trans has truly opened my eyes and made me become much more aware of some of the discrimination that does go on. And I don't want to start comparing our group to other groups, because that sometimes gets people upset. But there are a lot of different groups out there that still suffer a great deal of discrimination, and it's hard when you're not in one of those groups to sort of see it. It's like you hear about it, you sort of know it, but until you're actually there.
Yeah, until you're facing the issue.
It really does make a huge difference, and it's an amazing thing.
Well, and we met a wonderful woman about a year ago named Donna, who runs an organization called Think Twice.
Yes.
And her whole message, she was particularly advocating for Native Americans and fighting the stereotypes and a lot of the discriminations that Native Americans face. But this notion of her organization that you should just think twice. When you see someone, your natural instinct is to make an assumption about them. Your brain is going to do that. It's the way the brain works. Before you say or do anything based on that initial impression, you should think twice. take a second to think about that and to, you know, really evaluate where your brain took you with your assumptions, because they're not, you know, frequently they're not really real.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot of controversy lately about, especially with kids in school, using the phrase "that's so gay" to mean that something is lame. And, you know, it's incredibly hurtful to homosexual people that being homosexual is associated with, you know, this derogatory comment.
Right.
And a lot of kids say, well, that's not what I meant. It's like, well, no, but that is what you're saying. That is the correlation you're drawing. If you mean something's lame, say something's lame. Don't invoke a social epithet in order to get your point across.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to sort of fall into that. The language, you know, that happens with our language, you know, things like that happen. And very quickly, you don't really even know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one of those things. Yeah, you sort of need to think about that when you're saying it.
The other one that I know people have really pushed on, and rightfully so, is, you know, when someone says, "Well, that's retarded." It's a really, really rotten thing to be saying. You know, I mean, that's in the exact same category. It's a social epithet, and you should avoid using it. You should say what you mean.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. But yeah, it's very easy to fall into that.
Yeah.
Without even knowing you're doing it. But so yeah, we need to think about the things we're saying, and we really need to think about discrimination and how people are discriminated against.
Sometimes in very subtle ways.
In very subtle ways, yes. You don't even realize it, and it's sort of this thing that has sort of happened. It's sort of ingrained from the time we're children. We learn these things, and we don't even know we're learning them.
Well, it runs the gamut, too, because, yeah, that happens in subtle ways, and people don't realize they're doing it, but it also happens in very overt ways,
Yes.
and people think they have the right to do it. Religious discrimination. I have banged on this show a few times about this case that's going through the court system in Connecticut, where a supervisor, fairly high up one, fired or is accused of firing her employee, who was his district sales manager, for being Wiccan.
Right.
And actually made comments that she wouldn't have a Satan worshiper on her team.
Right.
No. But these things happen, and she obviously felt like she had this righteous cause, and it's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in the realm of employment, you know, it was only a few decades ago that, and it's been with various different groups, but, you know, when there were signs in the window, you know, Irish need not apply, or whatever other group it was at their own time, you know, you sort of have to take a look and say, if I was to make a sign that said Wiccans need not apply, would that land me in a lawsuit? Yeah, it probably would. Well, then you really shouldn't be making your decision based on that category. Right. You want to put a sign in your window that says insufficiently skilled workers need not apply. Now you're actually making a decision based on the requirements of the job.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We have come a long way, but we have a long way to go.
And fortunately, we are in a country where we're willing to talk about this kind of stuff. You know, we're willing as a country to, culturally, to actually try and talk about, try to deal with. As much as a lot of people look towards Europe as a social, you know, for social freedoms, as an example of places of social freedom, they're suffering really bad racial divisions in a lot of those countries, really bad racial immigration policies in a lot of those countries.